and gentlemen, the man song.
He's the man. He's the man.
I don't take no crap from anybody else but you. I wear the pants around here when I finish with your laundry. Cause I'm a guy you don't want to fight. When I say jump, you say yeah right. I'm the man of this house until you get home.
He's the man. He's the man.
Gentlemen, we need to talk. I'd like to talk to you about the man card. Every man is born with a man card. The man card is required to be accepted as a respected member of the male community. That's an example of a man card. Now, if after seeing that you just asked yourself,
But I don't have one of those. Where do I get one?
you just lost your man card. Now, guys, it is important to note that you can definitely lose your man card. At any point, it can be revoked by other respectable males for doing non-respectable male things. The only way to get your man card back once you've lost it is to perform an act of manliness, and no one wants to wrestle a bear. Until next time.
You the man.
Amen. Hey, is anybody else thankful for a place where we can have fun? Yeah? And also be serious about our faith and allow God to speak to us and challenge us. I love that. Hey, I'm excited. We are in week 2 of this little 3-week series we're calling Man Card. And so we're talking about this whole idea. And would you guys welcome Mike Toll here with me today?
Thank you.
Now, Mike, I want to be honest with you. We had been planning this series for months, and then just a few weeks before the series starts, Mike tells me, do you know it's the first week of our series? It's our 10th wedding anniversary, and I think I need to plan a weekend and go away with my wife. And so I mentioned that to everybody last weekend, and I personally thought about it more and even prayed about it to see maybe what God thought, because we weren't sure if doing that in such short notice caused your man card to be at risk or solidified it. And after serious consideration and prayer, we think your man card is in better standing because you honored your wife that way. That's good.
By remembering that my anniversary was 3 weeks in advance. Yeah, totally
Okay.
didn't plan for that trip at all. So you allude to an important point there, Rob, and that is, it sounds like there's some ground rules that go along with having a man card.
Right. And so we want to make sure, guys, that none of us find ourselves in a situation where we behave in a way that we didn't know was going to cost us our man card. So we want to be crazy clear about these things.
Now, you guys went through this last week. I saw the video. Actually, I listened to it while I was driving. I'm sure there's some folks here who weren't here last week. Can you tell us and review so we're all on the same page here about what is acceptable and what's not?
All right, so here are the man card basics. There's 3 of them. The first one is that all men possess a man card in light of just this idea of God-given manliness.
Now, last week, Travis said that you were a little bit older and a little bit more experienced. Now, if you guys don't know, Rob had a birthday last Thursday, a couple days ago. So,
Woo! I'm significantly more experienced now.
right, so now that you're another year older, share some wisdom here, if you will.
So here's the thing, guys. As men, we inherently, it's true, in this overarching sense that we possess a man card. And we should actually have a physical representation of said card, just to be able to, represent this truth.
What do you mean there?
You want to know what I mean? Well, let me show you what I mean. This week I got this special little pocket right here, similar. If you guys don't know what this pocket's for, it's actually for your man card. And so here's my man card. There we go. And so it's made of heavy gauge steel, so it can be used as a weapon if necessary to fend off attackers. Right? We talked about protection last week. It also says man card, has appropriate facial hair on it. And then it has other functionality too. It can be used, if you're sort of trapped and you need to open a black cherry soda. Hey, you want me to open one for you?
No. I don't know where Travis was last week, but...
Oh, you got your own man card?
I brought my own man card.
All right, here you go. I think I'm going to have a cream soda. Very manly drink. Okay.
So... what's the second ground rule then?
So here's the second ground rule. We all need to know this. Participation in anti-manly things puts our man cards at risk.
Let's go through some super, super clear examples. So again, we're all on the same page of what is acceptable and what's not.
And I thought Travis's example last week was perfect, right? What Travis told us, guys, if your wife, your significant other has been dying to see this chick flick and she begs you and you don't really want to, but because of your deep love for her, you watch it, totally fine. But if you are ever caught watching a chick flick all by yourself, no, your man card gone.
Not acceptable. And then there's having the dude that works at the auto parts store install your windshield wiper blades for you. Not allowed under any circumstance. And I don't care if you wear a suit and tie for a living, you can put on your own wiper blades like a big girl.
That's right. All right. The next one, and really I want to give two here just because I think these are sort of the same thing.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
But we need to understand that. So if any man decides to get a lower back tattoo, man card gone, right? Now the other one that's very similar to this
hand in hand
is if you're a man, unless the only possible exception here is if you have more kids than would fit in a Suburban. If you are a man and your primary form of transportation is a minivan.
Yeah, not allowed. You have to give up your man card. Now, probably the most important part of all of this is disagreeing with any of these in a whiny tone, whining and complaining and being emotional about it. Not allowed. It's the same thing I tell my 3-year-old and my 7-year-old. Don't whine. When I've got to tell a grown man, don't whine, his man card gets pulled.
That's
not
right.
allowed.
That's right. So if you didn't like any of those things we just said, you can disagree. You can want to fight us afterwards. We can arm wrestle to see who's right. But you can't go, I don't think that's right, in a very whiny, emotional way. Just like total inappropriate behavior. Any of these things and a whole bunch more can put your man card in jeopardy. It can be at risk. It can be on probation. And you can outright lose it. And these things aren't necessarily in order. I mean, as guys, we can do some things that go straight to your man card is lost without warning.
Yeah, no written warning. So, guys, every one of us possesses this man card. And it's up to us to maintain it. But you can lose it, like Rob said.
Absolutely.
So what's the last ground rule that we need to know about the man card then?
So here's the good news, guys. If you've lost your man card or lose your man card, a man card can be earned back, but it's much harder than just keeping it in the first place.
It's a lot like trust or respect. It's easier to maintain trust. It's easier to maintain respect than it is to lose it and have to earn it back. Same principle with the man card, right? So this is something that gets a lot of us in trouble because we think, well, I can just be not manly. I can bend the rules and then I'll earn it back later. The problem is it's so much harder to earn it back.
That's right. So the good news is we can get it back, but the bad news, like Mike just said, it's harder. It requires an overt or an extreme act of manliness to actually get your man card back once you've lost it.
Right. And so the example we have would be like swimming a raging river from one side to the other. A river that's raging and full of piranhas. And crocodiles.
It can't just be one.
No, it's got to be both. Or
like an unswimmable river with crocodiles and piranha, that would get you your man card back.
Yeah,
right.
but why go through that if you didn't have to lose it in the
Well,
first place?
we actually have an overt act of manliness that happened unintentionally just last night. We were in here practicing, preparing for this morning, and then we decided to do a manly thing. We decided to go for a motorcycle ride.
Right, got our 2 manly motorcycles out.
And so we were riding through some twisty roads and got on some straight roads. Mike was in front, and we saw some little groundhog or something go in front, and then all of a sudden, like a deer, I think the Russians were behind it, a deer raced out and smashed into Mike while he's riding his motorcycle.
Right, safely going the speed limit.
Ish.
And still rolling on the throttle. I had no time but do anything but continue to roll on the throttle.
And so the deer actually broke his radiator, which was gushing radiator fluid, snapped off his foot peg, spun behind him. You kept the bike up, dude. If your man card was in question, you got it back, buddy.
Kept the bike up and took the deer home to mama.
Yeah. Well, she did cut it up, though. That's
yeah, she did.
So it requires an overt act of manliness, sort of like that. Now, I want to sort of honor somebody who I think is kind of manly.
Absolutely.
And actually, I want to bring him. Where is I? All right, here we go.
I'm going to take my man card.
I'll take yours. Yeah, mine's right there. Looking good. So Mark Ellis has been so manly, he's actually become part of the Man Cave set. Mark, on Monday, got a total knee replacement. And the very next day, he wanted to come to a meeting here, and we're like, Mark, no. You got to take at least a couple days to... And by Thursday, he was here serving Jesus, and we're encouraging him to kind of keep a good pace. But man, he, through crazy surgeries and procedures, he just wants to be here and serve Jesus. And I think that's pretty manly and awesome, Mark. So thanks, buddy. It's pretty cool. So, yeah. So now that we have the man card basics down, this series is really about looking at three characteristics that we need to possess to really be the men we ought to be.
I think I got one.
You got one?
I got it.
Well, I guess we could just
we talked about this 6 months ago, and this sermon, the series was born. I'm going with guns. It's got to be guns.
You know what? I was worried this might happen. So I asked the same question last week, and Travis gave that same answer. And so last week we talked about the arsenal, right? And about all that kind of stuff. And the reason I was worried is because I sort of thought that your arsenal was probably significantly larger than Travis's arsenal. He kind of took yours.
Wow. I've had a little bit of help with mine. But I don't know. What are we going to do then?
Well, so Travis stole your attribute, right? Is there something as you think about Travis that you think, you know what, maybe would be one of his attributes you could kind of take from him?
Well, I don't know. It comes down to two things, either plaid or facial hair.
Ooh.
I think let's go with facial hair.
Facial hair.
Let's do facial
so that's
hair.
good, but we got to be really clear here, right? Because here's the truth. Does any old facial hair cut it? Because my 11-year-old who would say, Dad, I'm almost 12, because he's going to be 12 in a month. If you look closely, he has a little peach fuzz starting to crop onto his lip, and I don't really think he's quite a man yet.
I don't think that'd qualify. And most, occasionally the right mustache, the right goatee would qualify, but nothing creepy, none of the truck driver mustaches. I don't know that that's what we're going for.
So help us here, Mike. What's the minimum standard of facial hair we really need to be man?
So I don't want to make anybody feel bad, and I don't want to exclude anybody, but let's be honest. It's the beard. It's the beard.
Amen. It is the beard. And we recognize that the beard is a significantly harder thing for some people to achieve than others.
Right. So Rob started his on May 1st, right? So that's what, a month and 11 days?
Yeah.
I started mine on Thursday.
And by Tuesday of this week, he will surpass me.
But as we were looking around, there's some impressive beards in here today.
Yeah.
I mean, look at this. Look at Lucas.
Lucas. Dude, Jason is just pure majesty back there.
All the way down. And in fact, I think the second gathering as a whole has more impressive facial hair than the first gathering. So you guys, you got it.
Yeah, no, totally good. So here's the question. What about people because this could be a tricky issue, right? What about people who may work in an environment where facial hair, especially glorious levels of facial hair, is really frowned upon?
Well, so situations like that, you need to kind of play on a case-by-case basis. So I work in corporate America where I can have it, but it's kind of frowned upon. In a situation like that, follow the corporate policy, do what's required, except all bets are off for No Shave November.
Right.
No Shave November, we want to see lots of facial hair in here.
You got to do it. Jesus says somewhere. For those of you in here who may be unsure about this whole facial hair requirement thing, we have some musical inspiration for you to listen to as you consider this. So check this out.
Dude, Ricky, look at that beard. It's so big. It looks like one of those mountain men.
But how are you supposed to compete with a mountain man? I think everyone likes him. Looks like a total lumberjack.
His beard is just so big. It's crazy. It's just so round. It's out there. Look.
So,
What do you say after that? I don't know what you say.
I've got nothing.
So here's the thing. We actually scoured the internet in search of some things to enlighten us about, what's so important about the beard for men anyway.
Right, and it was tough to narrow it down. There's so much content out there. I mean, we looked at millions of images, millions of memes, all kinds of stuff. So we had to boil it down to 5 things that we felt were applicable.
So number 1 is this one. A beard is a gift that you give your face. What a simple, foundational, important statement that just makes sense.
Right, it looks good. We call it a face sweater. It keeps your face warm in the winter, keeps you out of direct sunlight in the summer. That's a great gift if you ask me.
That's right. Now let's build on this. We already talked about some of the dudes in here who have glorious beards, so this one applies here. I'm sorry, I can't hear you over the majesty of my beard. So, guys, having an ordinary beard is fine, but some people have the courage to grow something that's more bold and majestic.
Right, and that beard doesn't just draw attention. It really elevates the level of the situation and drowns everything else out around it.
Now, do you think that may mean that if your beard is majestic enough that you could sort of be in a precarious situation where your wife wants to have a touchy conversation, maybe yell at you a little bit, and as you turn and the glory of your beard shines around whatever room you're in, it's so distracting that you avoid those things?
That might work for Lucas. It doesn't work for me. Jessica can see right through it.
Oh, that's crazy. So beards can add majesty. Now, this next one's good. I love this. Men don't cry, they water their beards. Now, the point here has really very little to do with the crying part, because here's the truth, guys. In order to keep our man cards, for some of us, we ought to cry more than we do. There's actually situations where men should cry. There are other situations, maybe sometimes where we do cry, that no man should ever cry if he wants to keep his man card. But this has nothing to do with emotion or crying. It has everything to do with the beard.
Right, exactly. You can buy beard oils and moisturizers and balms, but God gave us natural beard lubricant right here, our tear ducts,
Tear
guys.
ducts, that's right. Sometimes they just sort of work because our beards need a little something, something. So now, many of you hear these and you're like, oh, those are funny and they make us laugh. That's great, right? But what about something a little more serious?
Well, I think the next one is, and the next one really speaks for itself. In fact, let's not read it. Let's just put it up there.
Grow a sweet beard, you should.
If you can't trust a Jedi Master, who are you going to trust, right? I mean, that's it. That's Yoda.
So our final image we want to show you about this whole beard thing is even for those of you who may struggle even trusting Yoda. So we want to show you something that's been attributed to, who knows if he actually said this, probably the second most trustworthy person who's ever walked the face of the earth, second only to Jesus, Honest Abe, right. Abraham Lincoln. And so here's what he says: there's a name for people without beards.
Women.
All right, so just like last week as we talked about the attribute of protection, right? We said, hey, here's the deal. Whether you are a gun person or not, whether you have a ton of guns or never, ever, ever plan to have a gun.
And that is, like Rob said, the attribute of protection, that you and I would take responsibility to stand up, protect our wives, protect our families, protect our loved ones, and protect those that God has given us, has entrusted us with, really.
And in the same way today, we want to talk about provision. And here's what we would say about this. In the same way, God really doesn't care if we provide hair for our faces.
Except in November.
Right, we know that. That's just sort of true, right? True. But so he doesn't care if we provide hair for our faces, but he does care if we step up to be the providers that he has called and created us to be. And so let me pray, and we want to look at just a couple of things that I think are really going to help equip and shape us as we engage in this attribute. And so, Father, again, we want to thank you today for the opportunity to be in a place where we can have fun and laugh and enjoy ourselves. But God, too, I just pray that you would speak clearly to us in these next number of minutes. Father, help us to hear from you. And Lord, whatever you say, help us to take a step. We ask these things together in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, we're going to look at some words today. The Apostle Paul gives this young pastor named Timothy. But before we do, I want to give you just a little bit of the backdrop here as we again talk about provision. So listen to the words leading up to the verse I want us to really dig into for a few minutes today. So we hear these words: "Do not rebuke an older man harshly, but exhort him as if he were your father. Treat younger men as brothers, older women as mothers, and younger women as sisters with absolute purity. Give proper recognition to those widows who are really in need. But if a widow has children or grandchildren, these should learn, first of all, to put their religion into practice by caring for their own family and so repaying their parents and grandparents. For this is pleasing to God. The widow who is really in need and left all alone puts her hope in God and continues night and day to pray and to ask God for help. But the widow who lives for pleasure is dead even while she lives. Give the people these instructions so that no one may be open to blame." And so there's a couple of things going on here that we need to understand if we really want to get what the verse we're going to look at is telling us. And the first one is this idea of equality, right? Because what do we do in our culture? Well, younger people look at older people and go, "Oh, you just don't get it anymore. Your time has passed." And old guys look at younger guys and go, "Ah, you haven't earned the right to do anything yet," right? And we do this. And so Paul here is starting by telling us, sort of setting this tone of equality, right? Saying, hey, if you're younger, you're older, you're male, you're female, treat each other with dignity and respect. So that's a huge piece. The other huge piece here is care. When there are people in your family, when there are people in your midst, when there's people in the church who legitimately have needs, look after them.
Right, and take care of them. And that's what we're talking about here. It's the kind of living, it's the kind of life that pleases God, taking care of others. And I really like the part where it talks about taking care of the widows.
Right, and so what's going on here in the context is the church is trying to figure out how to help all of the widows who need help, right? All the people who have sort of lived their life and now they find themselves in this position where they're all alone and don't have, help and families. And so the church only has a limited amount of resources, and they're trying to figure out how to make that cover all the people who have need. And it's interesting because right after the verse we're going to look at, we see Paul actually give some rules for the widows to look after. And he says, widows who are older than 60, he says widows who are faithful to their husbands, and widows who have a good reputation and they raised their kids well, they were generous people. It's this picture of reaping what you sow, right? And I think two things are going on. One is hey, if you live this way, this should be revisited back on you. And the other thing is the group is still too big, so we got to figure out a way to make the group small enough that it's manageable. But the idea here is if a widow has children or grandchildren, if the person who needs help has family members, those family members ought to help.
Right.
So that gets us to the verse I want to show you. It's 1 Timothy 5:8. And I want to just show you this in three quick sections. The first bit says this: anyone who does not provide for their relatives.
And this kind of raises the question mark. Why should we provide for the relatives? I mean, the government does that for us, right?
Yeah, but it's sort of insufficiently at best.
And it's dehumanizing. It's not efficient, and it's not what God has called for us to do.
Yeah, and if anyone has ever been in a line like that, right, where, hey, we just need a little bit of help, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, here, and it's like, well, I don't need that much help, and then you make just a tiny bit of money more, and your help goes from too much to nowhere near enough, right? It's like, there's just no dignity in that at all. And this whole idea of our relatives, right, that's a pretty broad thing. It's like, well, those people and I are related, sort of, kind of, not really, and I'm not even sure that I like some of those people. let alone want to help them. And it's interesting. I think your family, not about the like, don't like piece, but I think your family does a good job of this. You guys, have some family that has a farm. You guys farm together. You guys every week share a meal together. And I think that is kind of cool. But even still, when we think about this broad idea of relatives, I think the question sometimes we ask is, does God really expect me to help all those people?
And that's what this verse in this section's outlining. I mean, it is expected. And as much as we're able, it pleases God, and it's really, as this verse shows, it's our duty to take care of these people. It's our duty to take care of family members who are too young to take care of themselves, are too old to take care of themselves, because they took care of us when we were young, and they're going to take care of us when we're old.
That's right. So again, it started, anyone who does not provide for their relatives. This next bit says, and especially for their own household.
So looking after extended relatives, like I talked about, is important, but taking care of your own family and your own home is specifically mentioned here as an even higher level of importance.
Right. I love that, right? And that word especially, right, adds a lot of weight. And as weighty as that may feel, how this verse ends is really the crusher. I mean, this is like the heaviest part. So we ought to provide for our relatives and our immediate family as the scriptures command. But watch this. If we don't do this, this person has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Oh.
Think about that for a second. That's heavy. I mean, this is literally a commandment written here. And those are the consequences that were on the board. And really, isn't that what we're all here for? I mean, it is about our faith, right? It's about believing, and it's a pretty simple instruction that's given to us here.
And the challenge here, guys, is this. If we say that we believe, right, if we say that we have faith, but we don't actually follow it with our life, if we don't actually follow it with action, then what we say we believe, our faith, is completely invalidated by our lack of action. We just did a whole series about this last month as we talked about one-hit wonders, right? Like this whole idea of, oh, Jesus, I love you and I'll do anything as long as it's like one time a year and it's really fun for me, and then maybe I'll see you again in a year. But you can't count on me other than that, right? When we live this way, it invalidates things. I was at a conference for a couple days this week, and one of my dear friends who spoke, he actually said this. He said, gone is the chapter of the church where our emotional response was all that was required. And we are well into the chapter of the church where we as people of God must respond with our lives. We've got to live it out. Right? If it's just how we feel or what we think or what we say, but our life never engages in it, it is invalidated. And, I think the important thing here is that, and then built on that, we see this picture throughout the New Testament, this theme of equality. Now, for some of us who maybe lean conservative, we don't like this idea. But you know what? The Bible calls us beyond our conservative thinking and our liberal thinking, right? Biblical thinking is more important than all of those things, amen? And so what's going on here? The text is saying, hey, you know what? Those of you who have more than you need, I want you to help those who don't have enough. And if we're not willing to do that, especially within the context of our own family, God has some heavy things to say about it.
Right, and it's pretty clear. It needs to be actions, not words. And you've heard the expression, it's not necessarily biblical, but you've heard the expression, actions speak louder than words. That's what this is talking about right here. So with that, we've got two thoughts that we wanted to share and two questions, two challenges we wanted to ask.
So the first thought, very simply, is that all of this is a big deal. And a big deal to God.
And this idea of provision, it's huge in a number of ways, and we're going to address a couple of them here.
So we live in a culture, right? Then I don't know if you guys know this, but it's true. We live in a culture where they're now saying that the idea of adolescence, you're not an adult but still in your adolescence, now stretches into like the 30s, people who are 35. And we see this, don't we? More people kind of in that age range living with their parents, living in the basement, more concerned with their next video game than they are with paying back student loans. And we even see people who quit their jobs, who need their jobs to provide for their reality and bills and stuff, quit their jobs in order to find themselves. And there's a couple of stories that always come to mind when I think of this. One was a family who was part of our church plant in Indianapolis. And he had a job where he made a ton of money at certain times of the year, but his work was somewhat seasonal, so there were other times of the year where there was just not enough. And it was always at the times of the year where they had plenty of money, where they would stop at Starbucks that was 30 seconds from the church and come with $20 of Starbucks drinks to church, even though we served Starbucks coffee for free, right? It was this family that when in a good time of the year, he bought a PlayStation, a Nintendo GameCube, and an Xbox because, well, there were games for each system you just had to have, right? They bought a house. They lost it within the same year. Wow. And then in the downtime, because they couldn't be responsible, and he couldn't look out and look after for his family. They would like beg grandma and grandpa in the church to help us, please, because we need help. And so that's really difficult. And then I remember years later doing a message, and the whole point of one of these messages was, in order for God's economy to work, we've got to work, right? And that doesn't mean everybody has to have a paying job, but in some ways we all have to contribute, right? We have to be a part of the solution and the process. And there was a family in the church. He was actually sick that day. His wife was in the service, and she heard that message. And because I think of the situation, immediately went and bought a DVD to bring home because he had decided to quit his job to find himself, and left his wife with the significant number of obligations the family had. And he told me, he said, I listened to about 5 minutes of it, and I threw it out, and I crushed it with my foot. And I think, isn't it interesting how when we want to live in ways that are against what God tells us, how that can create a lot of tension in us. We can even become angry because we don't want to hear those things. But man, when we listen to them, they can be powerful and transforming in our lives.
Right. And this applies, if this applies to you, if you are able to provide and you're able to contribute and you're not, especially men, I'm going to challenge you. Listen to this. Take the full weight of this verse. If you want the man card, it's time to man up, take responsibility, be a contributing member of society, and provide for your family, your wife, your kids, and contribute.
That's right. So this idea of us taking responsibility is a big deal to God. But I want to be careful here, because if you're here today and you've ever been or are currently in a situation where life has just gone sideways, right? And you really didn't plan this, you didn't put yourself in this position, but man, the provision thing isn't happening in your house. None of what we're saying today is intended in any way to add extra weight to you. In fact, most people at some point in life find themselves in a position like that, right? Where it's like, I don't know what happened, and I'm without work, and I can't find, and you do everything you can, and you find yourself here. Again, this is not to sort of stress you.
Now, let's talk about the ladies a little bit.
Okay.
The stereotype.
Are you an expert there?
Jessica's not here, so yes. She'll watch the video. Love it. So the stereotype is largely true that women value security. Women want to know that there's a roof over their head, that there's gas in the gas tank, that there's food in the fridge, and that the checks they write are going to clear. And that's not just something that they kind of want or kind of need. That's a deep, hardwired, emotional need that they have. And when those things are put into jeopardy, when a woman has concerns over those things, that security, it's not just an inconvenience. It's not just something that she's kind of thinking about. No, that gets down to the core of who she is. Women need those things provided. Again, it's not just the kind of a want and a hope and a dream.
Right. And in this exact same way, God has hardwired men to be providers. We saw our grandpas do this, many of us. We saw our dads do this, right? And it's who God made us to be.
Right. And we don't live, it doesn't mean that we need to have the old 1950s single income, the man goes out and works type family situation. There's many multiple income families, 1, 2, 3, 4 incomes, multiple jobs. But ladies, I'm going to give you guys a little secret about men here. It doesn't matter where the income is coming from, who's out working. If there's financial problems at home, if things are not being provided for at home, the man is going to feel that. Again, like the women have that need to be taken care of, that need for security. Men have that same hardwired emotional need to provide. And if things are not being provided for, whether it's whatever income, wherever the money's falling short, whatever is falling short, the man is going to feel that as a crushing weight. And I'm getting some nods. Some guys know what I'm talking about in here.
Yeah. We feel completely responsible in those moments. And so, ladies, if you ever find yourself in a season like that in your family, and our prayer is that none of us ever have to have another season like that, amen? But here's the thing. Women, if you find yourself in that position, what we desperately need from you is your support and your understanding, not your prodding. Hey, have you done this? Have you thought about this? Have you done this today? Did you take that step yet? You need to do this, right? We already feel it in such a deep, crushing, we don't even know if we can function as a human being if we can't get this figured out way. We need your understanding and support in those moments.
Now, we've established that this idea of provision and providing, it's important to us, it's important to God, and it's important to our families. It's time to step up, take responsibility, but we need to have God, to do this with God. You're spinning your wheels otherwise, and we need to make God such a part of this journey that deep desire to provide needs to go hand in hand with having God help us do it.
Yeah, right, because it's so heavy, right? It's so crushing. So guys, there's one last thing here, one last idea that we have really got to wrap our minds around if we want to succeed at this attribute of provision. And I think this one is a game changer. If we get this one, everything changes. Ready? We must expand our understanding of provision.
Now, that's a little weird, I guess. For me, providing's easy. I wake up early, go to work, earn a paycheck, come home, bring it to mama. She takes care of everything else. That's it. That's my job. I'm providing. Period. Right? No. That's not it.
Again, ladies, we need your understanding here because for many of us, this is true for me. We talked about this, true for Mike. We are one generation removed. My dad and his dad never once changed a diaper. Ever. Didn't clean up vomit when we were sick as a kids. I'm pretty sure weren't trusted or left alone with us to sort of provide child care without mom or some other person present when we were babies, right? Like we are just one generation removed from the world sort of functioning in that way.
So Rob's dad and my dad, they both worked very hard and provided for our families, and provided for their wives.
Our moms.
Right. And they took care of the house. They waited for the moms to take care of the house and the family and the spiritual and emotional needs.
So here's what we do because we saw this, right? We saw this from all the past generations. We go out and we kill ourselves to provide for our families. And yet somewhere along the way, our families still break and start to fall apart. And we're just confused as to why.
It is confusing. See, can you explain a little bit more on that one?
Right. I think for some women, depending on how they're wired, man, you do the financial provision thing well, and they're like, thank you, that's good, I appreciate that, I can cover other stuff. But that's a small percentage. If I've heard this as a pastor one time, I've heard it 100 times. Rob, he doesn't love me. Rob, I know this because I just want him to spend some time with me, and he doesn't spend time with me. Rob, I just want someone to talk to, and he won't talk with me. Rob, I just want somebody who will care enough to be present and maybe even pray with me, and he won't do that. And all the while, the guy is getting up before Jesus and going somewhere and working until he almost like falls asleep to do this, to show how much he does love and care for his spouse, but she just doesn't communicate.
So maybe we need to provide what they want and what they need, not what we as men think we need to do as providers. And this is something that I struggle with. I come from the mentality, go out, work hard, earn a paycheck. That's my mentality, the way that I take care of my family.
What's your wife's mentality?
Totally different. For her, me providing is helping out and put the kids to bed, maybe clean the dishes, maybe not load the dishwasher the way I load the dishwasher.
Are you certified to be able to function at that level in the kitchen?
It's barely functional.
Okay.
So her idea of provision is different from mine. It's more than a paycheck. She wants me to be there to spend time and be involved with the kids and all the things that a good dad should do.
Yeah. And guys, like if we're being honest, right, this idea can be a hard, scary idea for us, can't it? Like, oh, I can't just help cover the basis and then tap out and let her take care. Like, that's what my dad did. Like, can't I, right? But here's the thing. This is where we have got to take responsibility and muster courage and lean into this, the courage to provide.
Right, providing the way God wants us to, providing what they need us to provide. And this is all part of having the man card. If you want that man card to maintain it and keep it, that's a function of it. That's a manly thing to do, is to provide.
So as we land, 2 questions, and these are really important. First one, guys, will you commit to being a godly provider?
Because this is important for God. He's laid it out here that we work towards that. We work towards becoming the best provider that we can. And because it's important to our family, that we become the kind of provider that they need, not that we think they need.
Right. And I know some of you probably are in here and you go, well, this all sounds good in theory. But Rob, I mean, come on. What's the likelihood that something like this is really going to happen? Some of you in here are like, that really, ladies in particular, right? You're like, that sounds good, but I've been asking him to do this one thing for me literally forever, and I don't even know that he's ever heard me say this, right? It's true, right? It's true. It's true in all of our homes, not just some of yours, in all of our homes. And so what we tend to think is this. You know what? We may have good intentions, and we may give it the old college try for a few days, but don't all of us just kind of default to what we know eventually anyway? And that's just kind of how things are. And this last thing, this last question, this last slide, I think is the key to the kingdom here. I think this is the thing that will literally change things in our homes, in our families, in our realities if we employ this. And so the question is this. Will you ask what they need you to provide? Whether you're married and it's your spouse, hey honey, what's the 1 or 2 things you really need from me that I'm not given? Maybe you're not married, but there's kids, and so the kids are your main concern. You know, and it's like, they're too young, they don't even know. No. Would you say, hey, guys, what do you, as your dad, what do you really need from me? Like, what do you need that I'm just not showing up for or delivering? Maybe there's none of those things, but maybe you have parents in your life or other family members, right, who are just at an age or in a season where they need more from you. Maybe you have none of those things. It's another relationship. None of that matters. Here's the question. Would you and I have the courage to, in these last few minutes of our gathering today, make a decision that at this time, and it has to be this week. It can't be, well, when we get to July and then my schedule. No. This week, will you, in the next few minutes, pick a time where you will, whoever the main person or people are, will you pick a time where this week you will muster the courage to look them in the eye and say, what do you need from me? How can I provide for you?
And let me tell you something. If you ask them, they'll tell you. Mm-hmm. They'll tell you exactly what they need. Jessica tells me every day how she needs me to load the dishwasher. But no, every day I do.
I think I need to borrow your man card.
Yeah, it's terrible. If you ask them, they'll tell you. And this is something that we need to do. We all can do. We can make this change. It's just taking that step and asking and becoming the provider that God wants us to be and that he knows that we can be.
So with these attributes like we talked about last week of protection and this week of provision, or any number of other things. I mean, for some of us, maybe you're good at those things or whatever, but there's something else you know that God needs you and wants you to do, a step he's called you to take. So as you think about those things, as God speaks to you, will you commit to taking a step today? Will you commit to being better? Think about that as we check out this video.
I'm going to bust down.
You are strong. You are brave. You are capable. You are part of the Lord's most valuable creation. You have ability. You have potential. You have gifts given to you by the Lord. You have talents to share with the world. You are a writer, an athlete, an inventor, an artist, a musician, a technician. And these talents will change people. You have joy to spread. You have jokes to tell, kind words to give, and wisdom to bestow. And that joy will change people. You are full of more amazing qualities, traits, and virtues than you could ever imagine, given to you by the Lord, who loves you, who loves you, who loves you no matter who you are, whether you're the big man on campus or the small guy in the back of the lake, whether you like swinging baseball bats or you like swing dancing, whether you're the fastest or the slowest, the tallest or the shortest, the skinniest or you could lose a few pounds, whether you're captain of the team or last one picked, whether your dad could beat up his dad or you never had anyone in your life who could fill that role, whether you're the champion of champions or you feel like the loser of losers, regardless of who you may think you are, the reality is that you have a responsibility because you have a power inside of you. A power that was formed before the beginning of time in a secret place by the God of the universe. There is a man inside of you, inside of each and every one of you that is waiting to burst forth and change the world. A man that loves, encourages, comforts, shares, teaches, laughs, cries, and builds up those around him. That man is where your strength lies. That man is where your potential lies. And that man is where your gifts, talent, courage, ability, and joy lies. Your responsibility as a son of God is to find that man and to set that man free. And when he is set free, he will bring change to our broken world. You will bring change to our broken world. And any voices in your head that are trying to tell you differently are from the enemy. And the next time you hear them, this is what you say. You say, "Nuh-uh, not me, Satan. I am a son of the living God, treasured, entrusted, and loved above all things by the Creator of all things, for the glory of Him who is greater than all things. I am awesome, and don't you forget it. This is who you are."
Let's stand together. You know, I just believe that that some of us, many of us in this room today just needed to hear those words. You are awesome. And you are awesome. Who God has made you to be is awesome. Regardless of how you've messed that up, regardless of how you've fallen short, who you are is awesome. But we need to start living, guys, like we have our man cards. And in all of our becoming and in all of our living, we can have an incredible boldness because our God is alive and he roars like a lion. So we're going to close our gathering today by singing just one of our favorite songs as a church. It's fun, it's filled with energy. But you know what? The God we need to become the people he has called and created us to be is inside of us. And he is powerful. And he will change us if we let him. Let's do that today.